I'm Maryn.
And I'm Christie.
And you're listening to Hung, a true crime podcast where we discuss court cases from the court of law to the court of public opinion.
Okay, so we finished up
Part two.
That's right. Caylee Anthony. Here's the big story. We got through 1 month of Caylee Anthony, the 31 days that Caylee has been missing, and what Caylee was doing during that time, and what she was saying was going on during that time. So now we have finally, the cops are involved because Grandma called the police because she knew she had to force Caylee's hand somehow because Caylee was not cooperating. Whatever she needed to do, she was going to do it. So now we're looking more at the police investigation, the expert witnesses and things like that. So let's dive right into it. Okay, so the first witnesses that we have of law enforcement are the first people that responded to the call. It was a bit of a confusing situation because the initial call out and the person who showed up was responding to a call about a stolen car and some stolen money or whatever. So he's a little bit confused.
They weren't prepared for what they were walking into.
Exactly. They were not prepared at all. So Caylee says, all right, I dropped Caylee off at the nanny's house on the 16th and I haven't seen her since. And so, I mean, what's the obvious thing? What are you going to do as a detective? Okay, well, let's go there, right? Let's go to the last place that she was. And she says, yep, I can take you. So she hops in the car and they go over there. It's a 5-minute drive. And if you remember from last episode, we brought up the Sawgrass Apartments. Sawgrass Apartments number 218 is where Caylee's friend Dante Salati lived. What number does Caylee give? Well, it can't be 218 because Dante lives there.
Right.
So if they knock on 218, they're going to be like, I know Caylee, but there's no Zenaida that lives here, and I haven't seen Caylee or whatever. So she gives them 210. So right there in the same building, just slightly different apartment. It's on the second floor. The officers go there. The blinds are open. They can see in. There's no furniture in there. Knock on the door. No answer. One of the officers takes Caylee back to the house. So round trip's like 20 minutes total that she's with them, showing them where it is. And then they take her back home. She gets out, goes back in the house. The defense has this other tack that they're taking that Caylee was being threatened. They put her in the back of the police car in the cage when they drove her over to the apartments. And, you know,
I feel like this has nothing to do with anything because she didn't confess to anything. So
right. I mean, they're just driving over there. I mean, that's the way police cars are set up.
Right.
And the fact that she was there 20 minutes. They drove over. She pointed it out. They drove back. One of the law enforcement agents, he stayed to do further investigation and talk to the people he needed to talk to. And they just went back to her house. So she gets out of the car and goes back in the house and whatever. So that just doesn't really say, we're driving her around for hours in the back of the police car, grilling her, and we're going to get you for this, and we want you to sweat because you're locked into the car. That doesn't really line up with that. Then Detective Yuri Melish is called in, and he's the lead detective on the case that is called in numerous times to testify. Caylee has written out her whole testimony. He reviews that with her, says, is there anything you want to change? Is there anything you want to add? And she says, nope. And she signs on the dotted line. And so they're going with that information. That's what she's told them, that Caylee was taken by the nanny's Annie. Zenaida Gonzalez Fernandez is her full name.
Such a detailed hyphened last name.
Yeah. And the description of, you know, she's 5'7" and she is part Hispanic and part black or something, I think. And then also her hair and her eyes and how much she weighs. And she's given all this detail. So they start looking for this person. But do you have a phone number for her? No. or it's now disconnected
Some
or
service.
something. I don't know. It's just, yeah. Anyway, they go track down the apartment manager, and that apartment, 210, has been vacant since November of the previous year. So it's been 9 months that it's been vacant. Mm-hmm. And they checked to see, was there ever a Zenaida Gonzalez Fernandez that lived at that apartment or even in the complex anywhere? No, she did not. This is one of those examples of you find something that's close to something that's real. The other person that testifies right after that is a Jeffrey Hopkins, which we have a Jeffrey Hopkins that supposedly has a son, lives in Jacksonville. They might get married someday. Well, he used to work at Universal a long time ago. Hasn't worked there since 2002. Nothing to do with Casey. They never dated. They haven't been in contact. There's
just a name she knew.
Right, exactly. Oh, here's somebody that I can describe. Here's a name that I know. Mm-hmm. Tip to any criminals out there. Start with build your lie around a truth. Something that you can remember, because you can go back to that and you just add on to it. So that seems to be what she was doing in this case. With Detective Melich, so first they can't find anybody by that name, or they just don't match up. And they say, okay, well, how did you meet this person? What's the connection? And it comes down to all of these connections come through Universal Studios, through her job. So they contact someone in HR from Universal, and he's looking up these people. Casey has not worked at Universal Studios. I mean, she worked at Universal before Caylee was born. She worked at Universal doing event planning for a third party, not actually for Universal, but, worked there with Universal. After Caylee was born, after maternity leave, she did go back, but then she ended up getting fired for being late or something like that. And her mom knew about that, but a few months later, she said, oh, they really wanted me back. They worked it out, and that they had rehired her, and she went back to work.
Of course, that makes sense. Casey's so awesome. Right?
She knows all about that job, what they do. She knows the people there, right? So she's got all this backstory ready-made for her. So now it's already been a year and a half or more that she's been lying about working at Universal and going to this job, that she has not been going to this job. She's also been talking about Zanny that same amount of time. If she's going to go to a fake job, she has to have a fake babysitter to watch Caylee while she's at said job. So she has to make up two things at the same time in order to make it work. But Universal, they're saying, oh yeah, we don't have any records. She doesn't work here right now. But she's still insisting, yes, I do. And so the detectives are like, okay, well, let's go. Let's go over there. Okay. So they take her over there. She goes up to the gate. Oh, I forgot my credentials, so I don't have my work ID. I don't know if she thought they were going to be like, oh, sorry, so sad. I guess I can't take you to my work. I tried, but I didn't have my ID, my credentials. But the HR guy's like, well, it's fine, let's let her in. Okay, lead the way. And she's just making a beeline for this building around the corner there. And the HR person is with them. And he's like, I know the building she's headed towards, that has nothing to do with events. I know this is not a real thing, but she just marches right in through the front doors. She makes it down the hallway. I don't know what she thought was going to happen. And then finally, the jig is up. She's got nowhere else to go. And she turns around, and their description is she puts her hands in her back pockets and says, I don't work here. Yeah. It's passionate until she's at the end of it, and then all of a sudden it's no big deal that I just lied about this. Actually,
I don't work here.
Not true. And so they take her into a conference room there, and they're talking to her. Okay, every single thing that you put into your statement last night, all of it is not checking out. We can't find any of these people. The places you said they worked, they don't work there. The place you said you worked, you don't work there. What is going on? We're here to help you find your child. Why are we here at Universal right now?
Why are you not cooperating?
Right. I mean, it's just the weirdest thing. She is just deadpan, not responsive. And they're going at her every way. There's probably like 3 detectives in there talking to her. One tries an approach, and she just, yep, yep, or no, or just minimally responsive. And then another one tries something else, and they're trying to appeal to somebody that's normal.
Right.
You know? They're like, okay, but don't you see this doesn't make sense? Of course it doesn't make sense. This is not normal. This is not a normal person you're dealing with, so all the normal things are not going to work.
Right.
You know, but they're trying it. Where they finally get a little foot in the door is when they start going on to a part of the story that they have not yet proven to be false. Because everything they're talking about that already has been proven to be false, she's just, you know, whatever about it.
Yep.
You know, or she's saying, those things are true. You just aren't looking in the right places. You haven't looked in the right state.
That's like kind of minimizing.
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like when I am so convinced that I'm right about something and somebody else is convinced they're right and we're going back and forth on it and I'm like, well, let me look it up. And I look it up and I see, they were right. You know, I'm kind of like, oh, well, you were right. But
yeah,
I don't want to talk about it anymore.
Celebrate it. Right.
You know, like I'm kind of like, okay, yes, I can admit, yep, you were right. Interesting.
Let's
anyway,
move on.
Yeah, you know, I was like, so kind of embarrassing and also kind of like minimizing.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, they're really going after her, trying to like, this is the time to be honest. If something happened, if there was an accident, they're giving her every avenue. She's still insisting, nope, she was taken by this person. This story is the real deal. One thing that she had said is that Caylee had called her that morning or something. She talked to her on the phone. It was from some unknown number.
And now that number's out of service.
Yeah. Yeah. And so they're kind of like, tell us more about that.
Like phone records don't exist.
I know, right? It's like, well, what phone? Where is the call record?
She's lying to not just anybody. She's lying to police officers who have access to all of these things to be able to easily disprove any sort of lying.
This is not your mother.
Yeah.
They can verify.
Right. You're saying phone calls that happen that are not in your phone records. So.
Right. Well, and that's why she makes up, I have a second phone.
Yep.
And the whole, I had a work phone for a non-existent job and her own personal cell phone and all that information's on the work phone. But then it's, but the SIM card got lost of the work phone. So I've been taking it in and out. I don't know. It's just ridiculous. There's some reason why. Well, it's really true. I just can't prove that it's true, or I can't access that. There's just some other big extreme.
Which is why I just don't believe any of the other things, even if they could be true, because it's too convenient.
It's so hard when you see all of this and how she just doubles down until she can't anymore. And unfortunately, it's like the whole sexual abuse allegation.
Exactly.
Who can prove her wrong? So she could keep insisting that because that's the one thing, or a one thing anyway. There aren't very many things that can't be proven one way or the other, right? So when they finally are like, okay, well, tell me more about that. And there's a lie they haven't caught her in yet.
About the phone call.
Yes, the phone call talking to her daughter, what they said and what happened next. And she's so excited to be able to like, let me work my magic and spin some more story. It's just weird, this like change in her when she finally gets an audience again for her lies, and they seem like maybe they're going to buy the new thing that she's selling. And the defense on that, they were pretty much, you knew she didn't work there. Why did you go over there? You were just trying to embarrass her or whatever. Well, we tried, but she's still saying she does work there. Sometimes records are wrong. Maybe there's something misspelled. We don't know. She's insisting that she does work there, even though it's not showing up in the system.
And it's not about embarrassing her so much as it's about catching somebody in a lie. Maybe they spilled now. Okay, you know what? I'm giving it up. Yeah, you got me. And maybe give up the rest as well.
Right. Well, and the other thing is, this is the only lead we have, right? Like, we're following every lead that we have. And if we only got this far with talking to someone in HR, well, we got to take it the next step then, because you're still saying there are these people and they work here. So let's go and let's talk to these people and let's track them down. We're still looking for this child.
And the only thing that really matters, unfortunately, as far as the trial is concerned about all this about Zanny the nanny, is just adding on to basically character witness that she's like lying about all this stuff, because at this point the defense isn't going with this story. The defense is admitting, this was a lie. So you can't really catch them in like you say this person exists. Well, she actually doesn't. So that means you're guilty. When it's like, you're right. She doesn't exist. yep, Casey was lying about all of that.
Right. Isn't that crazy? You can tell she's not normal.
Yeah. And so this is actually the story. So they can't really do many gotcha moments when it comes to the Zanny story because they're already switching. She did lie about that. And in some ways can maybe almost give you points maybe with the jury in the sense that she's almost like humble and saying, yeah, you know what? I made some mistakes, but I didn't make that mistake.
Right.
You know, I lied, but I'm not a killer.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. From a jury perspective, because the defense is hammering home, something isn't right here. This isn't normal. Who does this? You know, then as you're listening to all of these people come and say things, it's supporting the defense's case. Yeah, this is not right. And they told me it wasn't right.
It was really smart of Jose Baez to just...
It was, and I felt that, okay, well, I mean, they are kind of proving his point right now. And if he hadn't gone that route, it'd be like, nail in the coffin. You know, every person that's coming up there is just adding another nail, but they stripped the power of that by saying, she's messed up, and here's why she's messed up. It's not her fault she's messed up. Mm-hmm. She didn't do this because she is just a pathological liar. You know, she did this because...
She's conditioned.
Yeah. And then they take her to jail. Mm-hmm. So I believe it's because they've caught her in all these lies to police officers. I think they suspect at that time that maybe they're not looking for a live child. But I think it's also, she's not cooperating. So what course of action can they take? Do they just say, okay, we'll just go home and I guess we'll just keep looking for Caylee? This is a way to put some pressure on because you're like, we're not just going to let you lie and waste resources in a direction that is not going anywhere.
Right. And also be free to now go and maybe dispose of some sort of evidence.
True.
You know that they're onto you and these things. You know they're catching you in lies. So we're just going to prevent you from messing anything else up because it's falling apart. You're getting caught.
That's a really good point. So next they play hours of the conversations that Casey has with her parents and her brother while she's in jail. And in some ways, this is the most heartbreaking part to watch for me because her family is so desperate to believe her. Mm-hmm. And she is loving it. I mean, she is lapping it up because she can just keep telling her stories and she can be at the center of this drama and be the person who had her daughter taken from her and is not a killer, and watching her throw shade on all these other people that, like, her brother's like, okay, well, I know we have to be careful about what we say here, so I'm going to say a name and you give me a little sign somewhere out of the camera that, you know, so I know who I should focus on in my own personal investigation that I'm doing. And she's kind of like, we don't even need to do this under the table type of thing. I'll just say, nope. Or, he's good. Or, I wouldn't trust him at all. You should look there.
It so reminds me of when I was in elementary school and lied about, let's see. Well, it was being manipulative. I wanted something. Let's see. You guys were out of town. Grandma was in town watching us. I was in 4th grade. One of my younger brothers, Tyler, was in kindergarten. They got to leave on an earlier bus. I'm obsessed with my grandma. I want to go home early. So I tell my teacher, hey, my grandma said I could go home on the bus with my brother. And she says, okay, well, just call her to make sure. I said, okay, so I call her. And now in my head, I need a reason. She's not going to say yes unless I have a reason. So now, hey, Grandma, I think I'm going to go home with Tyler. He's kind of nervous because these kids threatened him and said they were going to meet him at the bus stop. And so I want to go home with him. And she's like, okay. Well, we end up missing the bus. So now she has to come pick us up. And we're in the office. And now the office is like, what's going on? And now it's like, well, yeah, and they showed us a knife and blah, blah, blah. And Tyler's kind of like, okay, I don't remember any of this, and so now I'm in the principal's office talking about it, and now the lie's getting bigger and bigger.
Right.
And
it's like, what do? You feel like, well, I can't just, I just wanted to go home early, so we need names. What did these people look like?
And so I'm like, well, I don't know their names, and they're like, okay, well, could you point them out to us tomorrow? And I'm like, Yeah, and so in my head, I'm like, shoot, I'm going to have to point to some random people.
Right.
And I remember asking them what happens if they say they didn't do it. They're like, well, we'll know. Okay.
We already know. We already know right now. We know this is not adding up.
So my grandma has to pick us up. We go home and it's obvious that they're like, I don't know, because we get home, we pull into the garage. My grandma looks at me and she goes, do you swear on the Book of Mormon? Do you swear on the Book of Mormon that this is true? And I just look at her, start crying. No, it's not. Okay, we go back. We talk.
Who knew? She should have told me that worked. I could have pulled that out.
I swear on the Book of Mormon.
How many years did I go without having that trick up my sleeve?
Some of her lies remind me of that. If this gets thrown onto it, okay, tell me who to look out for.
Right.
Okay.
These guys.
This person's suspicious. When it should have just been Zanny anyway. Like, just be like, no one. Zanny took her. No one else is suspicious. Go find her.
Right. It's like all of a sudden it's in some big conspiracy of all these people somehow.
The story is becoming bigger and bigger.
Yes, it is. It's bizarre. And her parents, I mean, they're crying. It's just, she calls home and she just wants her boyfriend Tony's phone number. Mm-hmm. And he's like, well, I know Lee has it. Get him on the phone. I want Tony's phone number. Well, Mallory, his fiance, wants to talk to you. Just tell us, what can we do? And honey, I know. I mean, she's just so annoyed about it. I just want to talk to Tony right now. Okay? Everybody, all they care about is finding Caylee.
What about me?
Yeah, what? I mean, that is what they should be focused on. But I want to talk to Tony, you know? It's like, I haven't talked to him this whole time. And that does support the theory that she was so focused on Tony that it allowed her to minimize the importance of Caylee. And Mallory breaks down on the phone. If anything happened to her, I just don't even know what I'll do. Oh, you know, she's just, I know. I have to remember this phone number of Tony's, so I can't be bothered. Just give me your phone number to my mom. I'll call her later and I'll get it and I'll call you later. The parents, you can tell they can't eat, they can't sleep, they're going crazy.
Well, Cindy never works again.
She never goes back to work after this. She is basically disabled from all of the mental strain of this happening, right? And everything going on with Casey and all of that. I feel so bad for them. And they even do I know this might be uncomfortable, but you have to ask kind of thing. No, I'm telling the truth. She goes on and on about her inconveniences in jail, but she's not talking about what's happening to my Caylee.
So they talk about when she calls her mom. I saw your little
cameo on TV, basically.
Yeah. What do you mean you don't know what my level of involvement is? Well, I don't. I don't know your level of involvement. Mom, you're making it sound like I'm doing something, basically. No. Did you?
Yeah, so she's just mad that she's in jail. If I'm in here, I can't be out there helping.
You help with your information, first of all. And also, I'm pretty sure her relationship ends at this point, too. And so she's really
because he immediately is cooperative with the police. He allows them to tap his phone. He wears a wire when talking to Lee. They're doing anything they can. Who knows something? Let's see if we can find, because they're not really being super cooperative once Casey's in jail. It's just sad to me to watch them working so hard, chasing these leads that she's feeding them, and she knows. She knows. And it's just,
she's very close by.
I can feel it. I think she's about a quarter mile away from off the suburban drive.
I think there's this moment where her mom asks something about planting flowers.
That doesn't sound familiar, but...
Well, it's almost as if maybe she's wondering, hey, we want to plant some flowers as like a memorial. Should we plant them? Almost as if she's trying to ask if the body is in the yard, tell me where it is. Either it's tell me and I'll tell the police, or tell me and I will cover it up somehow.
Who knows? Yeah.
And that's obviously not confirmed.
So still not too much on the police investigation, because we're still watching a lot of jailhouse video and stuff like that, but she's now in jail and the investigation is ongoing. different investigators are coming and collecting evidence from the home, collecting evidence from her car, the hair evidence from the trunk. Actually, they test the air for things that are consistent with composition.
Decomposition.
Yeah, decomposition.
The composition.
This is my
of
composition.
Decomposition.
Yeah. So they collect air a couple different ways. They get a cadaver dog, actually 2 cadaver dogs involved. They've taken the car in and impounded it. And this is another thing that the defense brings up, is that all the detectives or other officers that are involved, they're like, okay, yeah, he came, he did the sweep on the car with the dog alerted on the trunk of the car, and the handler says that he had him park it next to another vehicle, and he walked to the other vehicle first, just kind of gets the dog into the rhythm of, okay, I'm going to work, this is what we're doing. But the defense said, how come nobody else said that there was another car there too? Honestly, they're just focused on check this car.
Right.
They don't care about that other stuff.
Standard procedure.
Right. Yeah. The defense said, usually you have a big line of cars and you don't know what vehicle is the
dog doesn't know what vehicle is anything. The dog doesn't know anything.
Well, there's the whole idea of a handler kind of cueing the dog, and that's why they respond, because the handler knows where they should be alerting.
Gotcha.
And so it's better if it's blind. He said, and that's in training situations, but that's not the way that we do it in the field. We just do the thing, right? So the dog alerts on the trunk. They also take the cadaver dog to the house too. Mm-hmm. And
I was wondering if maybe she buried.
Right. Is there something? Yep. And the dog alerts on a spot of the yard right near Caylee's playhouse that's in the backyard in the corner. Then they want to get a second opinion. So they get a second cadaver dog to come in. Don't tell the handler the results, whether the dog alerted, where the dog alerted. She goes, her dog alerts within a few feet of where the other dog alerted.
In the backyard.
In the backyard, yeah. And so they dig up the area. They don't find anything. And then they have the dog come back again after they dug it up, and they don't alert. Well, how come they alerted one time and then they didn't alert the other? Well, because you dug up the ground and now you buried stuff. But to me, that does kind of suggest, well, maybe she was trying to figure out what to do with the body. And
I think I heard this, like maybe there were tree roots or something. It just wasn't as easy as she expected it to be. But maybe she did take the body out there with her. I don't know.
Right. Yeah, she may have one of the days where she had the car backed into the garage. The defense brings up the fact that the family always buried their pet a certain way, and they would bury him in the yard. If you see, okay, this is how we've dealt with things, maybe I can find a place and I can just bury her in the yard. The fact they both alerted, that is like, okay. I don't think they had that other dog test the car, just the yard though. So, okay, a couple things that they're testing. They're testing the carpet in the back of the trunk, because when the scientist who is testing the air, when he opens that thing of air, it's like, woo! Human decomposition. But then when they ran the test on the sample, the particle that had the highest quantity was chloroform. And they were really surprised, because that's not something they expected to see. That's not normal. And it was like super tall peak. So just to be clear, and they hammer this home during the trial, that this is not a quantitative test. It can't tell you how much was there. It's a relative measurement, right? So everything else is just barely little teeny blips down below, and maybe some slightly off that line that are tiny little peaks. But there's like a super tall peak that's chloroform. And so they retest, they get a new sample. I mean, they're doing all this stuff testing. And yeah, the police really want them to do a quantitative analysis, but they say, we really can't do that because chloroform is volatile. It just evaporates and it disappears and dissipates. So we can't tell you how much was there, especially if this was the 16th of June. And now we're into the end of July, right? Like, I have no idea. Like, I can't tell you how much was there. And so they don't want to do they don't want to do that, you know, and they really can't. And it's fair that they're like, that's not the right kind of test to do. But the defense, how come you guys didn't do a quantitative test and this is only qualitative? And they're like, well, because we are honest and that's not something that we can really do.
Right. I'm sure the defense gets into this a lot. This was kind of new science.
Right.
This was the first time it had been
like
used
testing
in
air. And,
right.
Yeah.
And this was the first time it had been used in a trial before as evidence, which, to be fair, there was a first time that fingerprinting DNA or that doesn't mean that
blood
we don't recognize that as solid proof or whatever evidence now. I think what I heard that they really get into the can of air and like, come on, this is whatever, you know.
Right.
Is this reliable? Is this quack science?
Yes, you barely cracked open the trunk and you put a syringe in there and you sucked out a big syringe full of air. Well, that's not very much air, you know, and so it wasn't the best way to collect it. But then when they got in touch with the scientists that could run these tests, he's been working with cadavers. There's the body farm that's back in Tennessee.
I think so.
Yeah, they have bodies in all these different situations so that they can learn about the process of decomposition or whatever. So this is a guy that's been working there most of his career. So this is what he does. He studies decomposition. And so he has come up with the ingredients that we see come up in human decomposition. And you know, they're not unique to only human decomposition, but we see this constellation and we can eliminate anything that we can attribute to something else. We don't want to count it, but how many of these that aren't matching up with anything that are consistent with human decomposition? So he sends them supplies and tells them to do it again, to gather the stuff. They also send a piece of the carpet and they test the air from that, and it's off the charts, lots of chloroform there. And also when they did the inspection in the car, they found some hairs, and one of those hairs had a characteristic that is called postmortem root banding that has only ever been seen associated with a dead body.
Hair that's attached to the scalp of a decomposing body.
Yeah, so they found this one hair that has that postmortem root banding. They don't have enough DNA to do full DNA
based on DNA,
but they do have enough to do a mitochondrial DNA, and it does show that it was someone in the family. So Cindy,
like
Casey, or Lee, and it didn't match any of their hair as far as the color, length, whether it was treated or whatever. So it was,
and it was consistent with what Caylee's hair would have been.
It was consistent
lengthwise, color-wise, and the fact that it was not treated.
Right. So there is
the fact that there's postmortem banding.
And the smell of decomposition in the trunk, and a bunch of chloroform smell in the trunk, and you have a missing kid, and right? You've got all these things that is like, well, it does kind of fit, you know? So I felt like Dr. Voss, the cadaver guy, I thought he testified pretty well. He is kind of a unique guy, you know.
I feel like a lot of people, if you work with cadavers, you're probably kind of a weird person.
I did say earlier that, you know, the smell of human decomposition is toxic to humans. So maybe
you turn weird after.
Yeah, maybe it does something. But
well, I mean, you know, like you want to work in a funeral home, you want to work in a morgue, you want to do autopsies. Maybe you're a little weird.
But, you know, we need people who are curious and they're interested and they want to learn more. And
I mean, I think it would be super interesting. And also there's a sense of it being an important job. Somebody needs to do it. The thing that holds me back from is like, I don't know if I can do it, you know, like that. Dead bodies, especially not fresh.
Exactly.
You know?
It's like, in all stages of decomposition.
You're right. Like, I can't. But I'm not saying that all autopsy techs, all people that deal with dead bodies are weird, but like,
they probably are a little bit weird.
You know, this one's weird and that makes sense.
Right. Yeah.
Just odd.
But, I mean, one of the big areas of contention with him is part of this whole studying the different components of human decomposition is trying to, like, is there a tool, something we can create to help law enforcement find dead bodies. And so because we're not having to rely on cadaver dogs and whatever, is there a way, is there some sort of sensor that we can come up with? So he worked on this team at a scientific exploratory type of laboratory that are just pushing the boundaries everywhere, just looking for new things. And so this is one of the things that they had worked on, this kind of sniffer type machine that picks up on this combination of chemicals to help identify where a body might be. And the defense was basically accusing him that he's testifying for the money. His science needs to be verified through this case so that he can benefit financially from it.
He's trying to put his work out there.
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
Right. And it was just a prototype, right?
Yes.
Like, it's just plans. It's not something that's really being used. Mm-hmm. It was just an idea. But if that gets sold, then you're going to get some royalties. And he's like, I don't even know what we get. And I don't, like, it's
so did they use this thing in the case?
No.
No.
So it's just the fact that this is the first time this evidence has come out, right? So you just want to be in part of this case so that you can get your name out there and validate this whole idea of you being able to tell decomposing body based on these chemicals being present or whatever. But they did come back and say the government is the one that said, hey, can you research this? Mm-hmm. And they did, right? And if any law enforcement agency, the government decides they want to build and utilize these machines, they get nothing for it. The government owns this design. They get nothing, right? Yeah. So the only time they would make anything is if a private individual or company wanted to buy it that was not part of law enforcement, then they would get a small royalty divided between them. But it's like, how many people are there that are not law enforcement that are going to be buying this? So even if it's like, well, there are 10 weirdos out there that actually want this machine, it's going to be a pittance that they're getting for it. He's doing this research because he wants to find new ways to move things forward, to help solve these cases, to help find people. And instead he's getting accused of just trying to, you're just in it for your own. Yeah, exactly. To validate his
I heard something
theory
about like a dowsing rod type thing.
Yes.
Is this the same guy?
This is the same guy.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So he does say something about a dowsing rod, like for water. I've heard that you've said you could use a hanger to help it. And he's like, actually, that is something that has some of the qualities, right?
A certain kind of hanger, like not a plastic hanger.
Right. So more that he was studying how effective this was, not that he was like, oh, and this is the way you can find water for a well, but it is something that is utilized, and he's been studying it.
Right. And this all got brought up basically because the defense is trying to discredit him.
Right.
Basically.
You're a quack.
You're crazy. You're using a hanger to try and find dead bodies.
Yeah.
So jury, don't trust this thing about air in a can.
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly what they're trying to do. For me, he was able to, like, I'm just trying to do the thing, right? So, and also they talked about the computer search history. So they took a laptop, a desktop computer, and of course their phones, things like that. They discovered back in March of 2008, there were a couple of days, the 17th and the 21st, where there were some searches done about chloroform, how to make chloroform habit, how to make weapons with household materials, things like that were being searched. The history had been deleted, but it wasn't actually gone from the system. It was in the unallocated space. And it just so happened that chunk of data, there were no pieces missing from it. So they were able to search that and find these references to chloroform. I mean, makes sense that they started like, well, is there any sort of activity about chloroform? Because we got this hit on all this chloroform in the trunk. So that's the only reason they're looking for that specifically. Right. But they did call Ricardo Morales back when they were dating-ish time frame. He had posted a picture on his MySpace that said, win her over with chloroform, and there's like this couple dressed up sitting at a table, and he's got his handkerchief about to put it over her nose and mouth. They want to suggest that, well, either maybe he was at her house and he was looking this up because there was something to do with MySpace that showed up in the history too. And so, maybe he got this and he put it on at her house. Well, he says he never used the computer at her house. Mm-hmm. So there's that.
I did watch that one because, I knew things about it. It had been talked about a lot. So I wanted to see it, and I watched his, and I had to say that it was very, very data-driven and a little bit like, I saw a girl in the background falling asleep, and I was like, it's important information.
Eyes were glazing over a bit. Yeah. Well, because he's reading out http:// he's reading this stuff out.
All right, this line, what does this say? He's basically just translating the document for them.
Yeah, and I did think that it was important how he was explaining what certain parts of the history line meant. That helps me to see that more clearly instead of what the defense is just looking at, but you have this, and then 7 seconds later you have this, and so that means, and it's like, well, no, that's not what that means. Mm-hmm. And the whole defense wanted to go to, so I just brought the 7 seconds, like, okay, well, here's this, and then how long before there's something else that goes to something else? 7 seconds. But then he tries to say that, the first one that he was talking about was opening the Google search. Mm-hmm. The 7 seconds later was the results that came back. So to say, they only spent 7 seconds on that page. Well, no, it took 7 seconds for the search results to come back and populate. So that's misleading. Yeah, that is really misleading about the timing of that.
Well, and then something that's talked about a lot, according to John Bradley, the expert witness on this, he noted that there were 83 or 84 separate instances that the website about chloroform was visited.
Right.
So,
yeah, at first when they said it was like, woo, okay, well, that's something. Jose Baez, the defense attorney, goes through the dates right before and how it was like MySpace, 3 days before it was 82 and 2 days before it was 83. And then there's a day in between that there was no MySpace record at all. And then the 84 was in the spot next to the chloroform. So his suggestion is, this data got put in the wrong place because the 84 makes sense to be the next time that she went to MySpace, that it just added another visit on. Mm-hmm. So, I do think if she went there 84 times, that is significant. It also does make sense. That's one of those reasonable doubts, right? I'm not going to rely on that to make my decision because there is some doubt that maybe she wasn't there 84 times. But I have to say, I just did this morning, so I didn't do this before coming to my conclusion, but I was curious about how to make chloroform. Mm-hmm. So I looked it up, and I'm like, you don't even have to go to this site 84 times because bleach and rubbing alcohol create chloroform. You can get bleach and rubbing alcohol. You probably have that in your house.
True, which is I was curious. I didn't look this up. In my head, I'm like, that sounds complicated.
Right, you have a whole process to go through.
But if they had evidence of her going to a grocery store and buying this stuff, that would have been really, but I'm looking at bleach and vinegar, bleach and ammonia, maybe you don't have ammonia, bleach and rubbing alcohol, hydrogen peroxide and vinegar. You have all of these things in your house already.
Everybody, especially a nurse, is going to have rubbing alcohol in her house.
Well, and especially bleach. Maybe at a 22-year-old's apartment, maybe not. But a 22-year-old that's living with her parents, they've lived there for a very long time. At some point, you've picked some of these things up.
Yep. So I'm like, you know what? You actually could get this recipe in 7 seconds.
Right.
You could say, bleach and rubbing alcohol equals chloroform. Click. Right. I'm done with that. Mm-hmm. So you don't have to go back there 84 times, So I didn't know that when listening to this case, so I can't use that in my decision, but I did find it interesting.
I hope none of your kids go missing because we now have a search how to make chloroform.
Shoot! Yeah.
Also funny that they spelled chloroform wrong. Did they talk about that?
Yes, they did. That it was, because they're like, these searches. I was like, well, one was chloroform with an A, and then it came back at the same time, here's the results, and it says, did you mean to search chloroform with an O? And then that was clicked on to complete the search that way.
Yeah.
And both on the 21st and the 17th, that mistake was made. Mm-hmm. The chloroform with an A. Mm-hmm. So that does suggest it's the same user that put in the search. But you're like, if you were dumb enough to make that, I mean, come on. Don't you know now chloroform is spelled with an O? They told you last time. It was a few days ago. Yeah, so later we're going to come back to those searches. Some of the other things that were on there were like self-defense, neck breaking, but there also were things like,
hydrogen peroxide.
Yeah, things about internal injuries too, though. Like hypertension, things that actually, when they were going through them, I'm like, that sounds more like something that Cindy might be searching than Casey, because she's a nurse. That didn't necessarily seem like something I could see Casey searching. So I tucked that little tidbit in the back of my mind while the case went on.
Who knows, maybe she saw a word in something that she was looking at and then Googled that word too.
So there were Wikipedia pages that were visited that had to do with chloroform. They did say, yeah, looks like she was surfing the web about chloroform and other things like that. Then we fast forward to December 11th, and we get a 911 call that a utility worker went into the woods. Yeah, meter reader. Yeah, went into the woods to relieve himself and got a surprise and saw a skull.
Guys have it so easy, I have to say. I'm just going to walk in the woods real quick to pee. Like, I would be driving around finding the nearest Maverick, like 7-Eleven. I gotta pee.
You never would have found Caylee.
I never would have.
Never.
No.
Yeah, so he calls, of course, then. They're out there doing the search. We lived in Florida, and actually we lived in Florida in 2008 when this was happening. Yeah, that was the year, that summer we moved there. They had to like cut away vines and branches and stuff just to get in there, to get to the remains. So it was a little over 19 feet from the roadway into the woods, and the distance from the roadway to the beginning of the tree line was a little under 5 feet. So we're talking about 15 feet back into the woods. And if you've ever tried to walk through woods in Florida, 15 feet is a pretty long way.
Underbrush, bramble.
I mean, it is hard to get back in there. And there were a couple
if you're disposing of a dead body, you're motivated. You're motivated to get far in there.
Yeah, right. And you're like, okay, no one's coming more than 15 feet.
Right. You're like, I can't go any further than I have a dead body.
I'm done.
Yeah.
They found a Winnie the Pooh blanket, couple shredded garbage bags, and a tall rectangular laundry hamper. The remains were scattered somewhat. The way that the bones were found did indicate that her body was placed there soon after death. Well, 24, 48 hours had to be around that time because of the insect activity or lack thereof.
Right, they didn't find evidence of bugs that typically are there within the first 48 hours.
Yep, so she wasn't there within that first day or two, but from then on, everybody, all the experts said that skeleton was there, except for one little variation on that, but everyone else on both sides, they all said, yeah, that body was there. Both bug guys, both forensic anthropologists, they're all saying that body was there because with children, the bones in their spine, like your vertebrae, they haven't fused all the way together yet. So they have multiple pieces to them. And so the fact that all those pieces were found in order, like all together, says that there was flesh on that body when it decayed in that spot, or else those little bones would not be together where they were.
Okay.
It was very sad, though, to hear that scavengers had dragged her torso. So her head, hands, her upper arms, too, were in one place, but her torso got ripped away from the rest of that. And I think her lower legs might have been there, but part of her body got dragged away by scavengers and finished decomposing further away. Just listening to someone talk about that happening, and I noticed that George and Cindy were not in court for those days of testimony, and it appeared to be hard on Casey too.
Talking about George and Cindy, some people have gone on to say, well, they showed no emotion when they were in court. They really shouldn't have been allowed to be there, but because they were the grandparents, they were allowed, but they were received strict instruction to not react, not make a scene, otherwise they would be removed.
Yep.
So there was reasons for that.
And that's the same thing. The jury are instructed to not show things on their face to not give away like what they're thinking and feeling, which for some people, easier said than done, because if you could take a look at this face, you know right now what it's saying. Yeah. So y'all can't see it, but yeah, it's like I would have a hard time not having any sort of reaction on my face for some of these things, especially with some of the things that we're going to get into later, that I just listening to it again today, I was like, I just shaking my head like, are you serious? Like, seriously, this is ridiculous. This is so ridiculous. Anyway, they were long time going through all of this because they had the skeletal remains that they could easily locate on the surface, but they're still looking for other evidence too, right? Not just bones. They had a whole grid system marked out, and they're taking the soil and going down and sifting and recording where they're finding things and putting that in evidence. So they're in there like it was a week or two. Long time. Like, that sounds like the worst job ever.
Right.
I don't know. I think I might rather work on the body farm with decomposing bodies than be out there digging through that kind of stuff for weeks on end.
Those bodies are there because they asked to be there.
For science. Yeah, for science. So one of the areas of debate is the skull. And so they have the crime scene tech for the medical examiner's office that came and brought the remains back to the medical examiner, and the jawbone is in anatomic position in place with the remainder of the skull, which is very unique for skeletal remains found on the surface, because normally, a skull is round and rolly, especially with scavenger activity. Those things tend to get separated from each other, and you don't have the mandible and the rest of the skull together. But this one was, and there's also what they call the hair mass, that the hair, as it slides off the top of the head, just slides down the skull and form like a little nest of hair around the skull. The guy from the ME's office, he went down under as much of this leaf litter as he could and scooped and tried to not disturb the placement of everything on the skull and put it into a box that they then took to the medical examiner's office. And of course they photographed it prior.
Just a note on the hair, as far as the hair that was found in the trunk.
Not every dead person shows this post-mortem root banding, this trait in their hair, but we have this one hair that months before has been identified with post-mortem root banding. Right. And then they find the body of Caylee, and guess what? Her hair also shows with her body is hair that has that post-mortem root banding. So that says, okay, she's one of the 20% whose hair did have that characteristic after death, and a hair with that characteristic was found in the trunk of the car. So if you found her and none of her hair had post-mortem root banding, then you could say, well,
another dead body was there. So
yeah, another relative. Okay, if you want it, like, there was only one hair, and maybe it wasn't really that. Well, they'd already identified it pretty clearly as that, and then they find her months after this. So it's not like, oh, wait, does that look like? Okay, yes. They're not trying to match it up. This is months apart, and then they find the body, and it's also got that characteristic. So that was a pretty solid moment for me to say, okay, I think there is something that really is tying her body to the trunk of the car.
Right. So they pick up the skull.
They pick up the skull, they take it back, medical examiner does her thing. So one other thing that they have with the skull is duct tape. There are 3 pieces of duct tape found at the scene that were stuck to the hair mass, and a flap across the bottom of the face, basically. Of course, there's no flesh anymore, so it's not adhered to anything but the hair. The medical examiner, based on the circumstances of this case, with the child not being reported missing for 31 days, the lying and not helping this investigation move forward, the fact that the body was wrapped in a blanket, put inside 2 garbage bags, put inside a canvas laundry hamper, and there was duct tape over the face, that it was murder of undetermined means, because there was no damage to the bones and there was nothing else they could look at. So
so they can't tell exactly how she died because there's no body, there's just bones. And so whatever way she died, it didn't have any sort of physical trauma like that. Right. And just because of the circumstances of everything else surrounding it, that's how they come to the homicide deduction, because
Yeah, because the defense wants to, but she drowned, it was an accident, and the ME did say, like, that is the most common cause of death in Florida, but 100% of the time, the family calls 911.
Right.
Like, they're trying to get them help, and with children, cold water, all of this, you don't know. You could get them back. They have this neuroplasticity that they're so young that their brains can heal, and they may not have these lasting impact that an adult would have.
Yeah,
with a
nobody
drowning.
in this instance, no parent is going to assume that their child is past saving. They're going to do everything they can just to see if they can bring them back, even if they've been there for who knows how long. They're going to try.
Yeah.
And you're not going to be like, well, I probably can't do anything about it, so let's just throw the body away.
I know. And who has a child that dies in an accident and then disposes of them in a way that makes it look like murder?
Right.
Why would you do that?
Why?
Yeah. Why would you put them in garbage bags? Why are you throwing them in the woods, in the swamp? Doesn't make any sense. Like, why would you do that? Then they brought in Dr. Michael Warren, he's a forensic anthropologist, and his testimony was really impactful for me. Part of his testimony was regarding the jaw being with the skull in anatomical position, and also the duct tape, and whether that duct tape could cover the nose and mouth of Caylee Anthony, and whether one piece of tape could do that, or if more could. So he did do a little QuickTime video presentation that he made that superimposed the skull and a photograph of Caylee to get them to scale, and then the pieces of duct tape, where would they have been hitting on her face. And they didn't show it to us, only to the people that were in the courtroom. That was not aired, but they did describe it and say that in the video it does show the section of tape being higher and lower on the face, because we don't know exactly where it was. So it could have been here, it could have been here, whatever.
And it was big enough that it wasn't like it had to be only right in this position. Otherwise, it couldn't have really covered both.
Right. So they're like, well, either it was covering the mouth or it was covering the nose and mouth. The defense thought that was highly prejudicial. They did not want the jury to see that. They actually asked for a mistrial as a result of the jury seeing that, because they felt like the jury wouldn't be able to see past that it got their emotions going, seeing the picture of her superimpose the duct tape and the skull and stuff. But the defense wanted to say, well, so you don't actually know where that duct tape was, do you? It could have been anywhere. And he's like, well, yeah, anywhere, either over the nose and mouth or over the mouth. But that's the extent of the,
where
exactly, because, and I think the defense was kind of caught off guard that he's like, oh no, it's sure that the duct tape was over her face.
Probably because it also had the hair in it.
Yes, exactly where on the face could have been higher or lower. We don't really know. And we're showing that it could have been a variety of places, but because of it being in the hair, right? But also because the only time that he'd ever seen skulls found on the surface with the jaw still in anatomical position was humanitarian work that he'd done in Bosnia and Kosovo, which had a lot of ethnic cleansing and major killings going on. And he said the only time he ever saw it is in these bodies where there was duct tape over the faces, like over the mouth, right? So he's like, no, I do know that this is why the jaw is like that. So we do know it was in place, because that's why the jaw and the skull are still together. And that was a bit of a, okay, what are you going to say about that? That's pretty strong evidence right there. Right. Oh, wait, but Dr. Spitz, he's got another theory about duct tape and why the jaw is still with the rest of the skull. So stay tuned for that when we get to Dr. Spitz.
Right.
The bug guy was one of the other big ones, and he says that there is some evidence, minimal evidence of any early flies on the body, and suggests that probably that's as a result of it being put in the woods at the end of that stage where that type of fly would be interested in it, that it wasn't that they got into the trunk and laid eggs then. It was soon enough after the death that there was a little window of time they were still interested in the dead body before it got past its prime for them. But before that, for 1 to 2 days, it was somewhere that they could not get access to it. He did talk about, so there were some maggots in the garbage bag. There was also a paper towel in the garbage bag that had fluid on it that was consistent with adipocere, which is like when the flesh and tissue starts to decompose, it turns into a soapy, fatty type of substance.
So did they go back and get this garbage bag?
They did go back and get the garbage bag. The tow yard operator saw some stuff on the news and realized, oh, that's the car that was in here, and said, hey, maybe this bag of garbage would be helpful. And so he calls them and they do come and get it.
And as far as maggots being on it, okay, maybe they could have been in there, but now it's been in a dumpster. So maggots could have gotten there after the fact too.
Yep. That's exactly my thought process too. It doesn't actually mean anything because now it's been somewhere that insects are going to get into the garbage, right? It doesn't say about what happened to that garbage while it was in the trunk. It only says what happened to the garbage at some point between the house and the dumpster and getting it to the lab.
And I don't know if any of the testimony said, oh, yeah, well, we opened the garbage bag and there was pizza with maggots on it.
I don't think they noticed anything like that, but some eggs had hatched on that paper towel. And when they tested it, it was consistent with adipocere. So they suggest that maybe Casey was trying to clean up the trunk area and threw it in the garbage bag. And that's why the flies were attracted to that paper towel. But there really wasn't much in the trunk as far as bugs. There wasn't. They have found like one fly leg or something of the type of fly that responds early. Like, I mean, it really, like, I don't know that you can make much of that. To me, it's more striking that both bug guys said the body was in a place where those flies could not access it, or that evidence was washed away.
Yeah, because, I mean,
before it was placed in the swamp.
Again, it's like, okay, all of these things are potentially circumstantial evidence, but then added together. Okay, so cadaver dog, people say it smells like decomposition, that know what they're talking about.
Lots of different people are saying it.
Right. There's evidence that the body was not outside with access to the early feeders for about 2 days. So she had to be somewhere.
And that it was somewhere, it stayed in the same place
and
after
the hair in there. So all of this stuff, it's like maybe circumstantial, but all put together becomes very much less so circumstantial looking.
100%. And we also know that body, it was sealed up, wrapped in a blanket, inside 2 different garbage bags, inside of a canvas laundry bag. So,
and then in a trunk.
And in a trunk.
So if it was just laying in the trunk, okay, maybe bugs can get in there.
Yeah.
But also wrapped in all of these things.
Yeah, they didn't get in there. So we know that. They didn't get to it. Wherever it was, they didn't get to it. And then they did. Yeah. And from then on, it stayed in the same place. That's what we know. Yeah. They did show some testimony of, like, the remnants of the clothing that was there. Really, it was just like the collar of the shirt, like the little neckline of the shirt that was left, and then the letters on the front of her shirt, which they show the picture of her with the Big Trouble comes in little packages or something like that.
She'd worn that shirt in a picture, you know.
That lettering was found, that's the shirt that she was wearing when she died. That was pretty sad. And then we had Stephen Shaw. He is another fiber analyst that studies hair, and he did a whole study. They had never seen that postmortem root banding on any hair coming from a live person, but this could be studied further. Just because we've never seen it doesn't mean we never will see it, but so far we haven't. So
pretty typical scientist answer.
Yeah, exactly. They're like, well, here's our theory. Nothing yet has shown to be contrary to that,
which,
right?
To me, in some ways, like, okay, the defense can say, look, see, they're saying there's some doubt, there's maybe, but then on the prosecution side, you can just show, well, this is proof that they are non-biased, that they're not just going to say what people want to hear. They're like, so according to all of the studies that have been done, nothing has been found so far. Not saying it can never happen, but it hasn't happened yet.
And that's why they say, consistent with a decomposing body. It's consistent with that. We haven't seen it anywhere else, but they're not going to say definitively 100% it is from a dead body. They're like, we can't say that. We're scientists, you know.
The hair that was found with the body is.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yes.
And it has the same thing. That. So,
yeah. So he does a study where he takes hair from a number of different living people. He puts those hairs in different conditions, like buried in potting soil, sitting out on a windowsill, in the trunk of a car, on the dash of a car, all sorts of different things that he puts them there. And he's looking at the change in their condition over time. And some of them, I think, are 7 months or more that's in that whatever situation it's in that he's still looking at. And none of them show postmortem root banding. And they show some signs of decomposition because it's part of a human body and it is going to decompose like the rest of bodies do.
Right.
But it doesn't decompose in the same way. They also had hairs from cadavers that had the postmortem root banding, and 2 different scientists looked at all these hairs, which were a lot of hairs. That
just,
they
like, separated them out into which ones had it and didn't.
Yeah. So they had to look at all of these and each of them independently decide which ones, if any, they thought had the postmortem root banding. Then they came together, those 2 scientists, and they compared their findings, and each of them had misidentified one hair as having postmortem root banding that the other did not, and that actually was from a live person. But when they looked at those things together, they eliminated those 2 and said, no, that's not actually postmortem root banding. And so they did correctly identify all of the hairs that had postmortem root banding, were able to winnow out the ones that maybe were similar but weren't. And the defense, are you sure? Maybe you got it wrong. Maybe you're mistaken, which, like you said, that argument goes out the window when you see that on her actual body. Okay, look, it matchy, you know? So, yeah, nice try.
You know, the shoe fits, so.
But they said, well, you did this study after we did your deposition, so you're trying to bolster because this science is so new. He's like, well, no, I mean, this has been around for a long time, but there's always room for a continuing study, and a recommendation to do more study in this area was already out in the literature that he was already planning on doing it, which is interesting to me because their entomologist, the bug guy, he does a study. And guess when his study started? Oh, afterwards. I'm like, come on. And then he's like, yes, but I was going to do this study already. That sounds familiar. Why is it okay when it's your guy? But when it's the prosecution's guy, then that's shady. But it's your guy, it's not shady.
Right.
But some of the other things were someone seeing on the duct tape an outline that looked like a heart. That later, after further testing, then they went back to try and see it. And because they'd run all these other things on it, it was no longer visible. And so they went looking for heart stickers in the house to match. And there was a heart sticker found at the scene that they kind of made a big stink about. There's tons of heart stickers. I don't think that's a make or break of the case.
Right.
But, you know, it was an aspect of it. And then Cindy did get up and say it was me that did the internet searches and gave all these reasons why she knows it was her that did the searches. It was a little bit sus for me because it felt like a mom trying to help her child. But also remember, I did say it did stand out to me that this sounds like something that maybe Cindy would be searching and not Casey. So I'm like, well, you know, it really could have been. So maybe she's trying to help Casey. There were other indicators that made it seem like she didn't have a MySpace account at all. So she wouldn't have been going to MySpace. Like the order of things and how things
happening around the same time.
It just didn't make sense. Doesn't seem likely that it was her, but there was a reasonable doubt that maybe it was her that did those searches.
And this is one that I watched too because I've heard, okay, she took credit for all these. I'm like, oh, I want to see, how did that look? And well, prosecution is saying, your work is showing that you were working that day. And she says, yeah, well, I'm a salaried job, so I don't really clock in and clock out. Sometimes I work really earlier or really late. So even if my work says I was there, it's possible I wasn't there. She doesn't say definitively I wasn't there on this day, I remember. But she says, if the search was made that day, then I was home because I made that search. They're going like, is there some way to prove that you weren't at work? And she goes, I don't think so because I don't work there anymore. They probably deleted all of that information.
She said, oh, there would be if I had access to my stuff because of her emails. And they would have gotten rid of all those emails now anyway. So did you even try? No, I didn't even try.
Right.
It was kind of weird.
And then did you search for chloroform? And she goes, well, she
chlorophyll.
Yeah.
Because the dog's eating plants and I was worried about them getting sick. But then they also look for, were there any searches for chlorophyll? No.
And also they say, well, did you search this 84 times? She goes, I didn't search it 84 times, but I searched it a few times. And did you search for this thing and this thing? Well, broken neck, no, but there was a video on the side that talked about a broken neck. Like, it's shown that it was typed in as a search. And some of the things she's like, I didn't search for weapons made out of household products. Well, a search was made for that. So you can't lie. There's evidence there. So you say you didn't do it, but somebody did, and you're claiming you did all these ones. So
it did seem like, a Hail Mary type of like, I'm trying to save my child. I can't, I don't know, maybe for her own mental health, the idea, it's just too hard to accept. So if she's the one, that's her coping mechanism, that she's trying to deny that her daughter actually killed her granddaughter, because that is so horrible to imagine.
She needs to go to court for perjuring herself.
Some of the final elements of the prosecution's case before they rested was a tattoo artist. Casey went and got a tattoo that said Bella Vita, or Life is Beautiful. And this was after
during that 31-day period.
During that 31 days that she was dead, and how can you be celebrating that life is beautiful? Weird is that the defense wanted to spin it like this was a memorial tattoo that she was doing, but they're also saying that she's not accepting the fact that she's dead. I don't know. It's just a little bit of a weird whatever. And then they looked at all of her clothes and Caylee's clothes and stuff like that, and found the brands and sizes of Caylee's clothes. Did not find a undisintegrated shirt that was the Big Trouble shirt. The shorts that she was wearing were not in the house. They tested Casey's clothes for any evidence of blood or body fluids. They didn't find anything there. So that is the end of the prosecution's case, and they rest, and then the defense starts to put on their case. So, boy, Casey, you are keeping us busy here. We thought we were just going to do 2 episodes, and we're going to have to do at least one more episode to wrap up the defense's case. And then we also have rebuttal witnesses from the prosecution. I think we're going to be able to tie that all together in one episode, but, I've been wrong before about this whole series.
Okay,
and then we have Maryn's section of it, too. Which, who knows, we might need more than one episode for that, too.
True.
I'm looking at her printout of things she wants to talk about, and it is not a small stack.
That's true. Yeah, well, it's super interesting for me because I'm not that familiar with how a case trial honestly goes. So just hearing about the different witnesses, whether it's people who knew her or expert witnesses, and maybe their different motivations, super interesting. So I'm excited to hear about the defense's case and how convincing it is or is not. Because
the defense made some big promises at the beginning, and what of those things did they prove, if any or all? So stay tuned. Join us next time for part 3 of the Caylee Anthony saga.
Until then,
I'm Christy.
I'm Maryn.
And court is adjourned.